So we're going to talk today about what's good for Boulder is good for the Broads. Hi everyone, my name is James, and I'll talk a little bit about myself in a minute. I wanted to say, I don't come into any talk to swear. It's not like, oh, he's edgy, he's swearing to get you going. It's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to do. But I do get quite impassioned, and sometimes I can swear. And I was speaking to someone earlier, I was like, is it because I actually can't articulate myself? So I swear because I don't actually find the words. And they actually said to me, the nice thing that I said, well, Stephen Fry's probably one of the most articulate people I know. And he swears all the time, so it's fine. And I thought, yeah, if I'm as articulate as Stephen Fry, spoiler alert, I'm not. But swearing's okay, so fuck it. And I am not a developer, so if you are coming here to expect a talk on developer stuff, so at this point, I am not a developer. In fact, I'm not really even that technical, which is quite worrying when you talk about the companies that I founded in a second. But yeah, not a developer, not a techie. In fact, I studied politics and economics at the University of East Anglia, and to be honest, I'm not really very good at either of those things either. Love the neon party though. But it's a little bit about my background, somehow through more luck than judgment, and I think that's the theme of my career. In fact, that might be the title of a book, More Luck Than Judgment. I managed to end up working for an incredible company called Illinois Toolworks, and I spent 8 years there and managed to travel the world, so spent time in China, a lot of time in the US, and throughout that whole journey really, it was about, they were super acquisitive, so literally every week they were buying a new company. I mean every week they were buying a new company for about $10 million, so you know there was some serious due diligence and legal stuff going on. What they'd do is they'd buy these companies that were making about 15%, 8% profit, and within a year or two it's like, no, they need to be making 25% profit. So they were just throwing cash out and buying more companies. And it was super exciting, because you're going to these amazing companies and learning about how do I turn this thing around? And it just gave me a real bug and a real energy for, you know, having an impact. And I think that that's probably one of the things that in my life I've been very lucky to do. Did my MBA at the UEA as well. As you can tell, there's a theme coming through about Norwich, and it's going to be through the whole thing. But I managed to also, after leaving ICW, work with some pretty amazing companies, including one of my passions, which is pinball machines. I actually managed to work with Stern Pinball, and they were arseholes. But that's sorry, passion. Great pinball machines though. But this is probably the most important part of my journey and my career, is what I'm doing now, because I get up every day and don't do any work. No, sorry, you never work a day in your life if you enjoy it, that's the one. So the two things that I'm currently doing is Acceler, which is a startup incubator in the centre of Norwich. And the reason we started that was like, Norwich has got so much cool stuff going on. Norwich has like amazing people. Some of them are in this room, some of them. But it's absolutely incredible what is going on here. And there needed to be, I believe, a lightning rod to support and bring that all together. And I'm really proud that Acceler, I believe, is one of those lightning rods in the city. And working with Acceler and working through what we were doing there, we found that, you know, tech talent, in case you didn't know, it pays really well because it's in demand. And there just wasn't that throughput. And people always say to me, it's like, what have you got against universities? What have you got against higher education people? It's like, I've got nothing against them. They're doing a fantastic job at everywhere with the UEA. But, I'm joking, the UEA is doing a great job as well. But what they're doing is a lot of the comp sci stuff, and there's just not the throughput of talent coming through that we need to solve all of these really important challenges we have in society, right? And guess what? Developers can change those things in society as long as we have the throughput. So there was a massive gap. The other thing that was really important to me as well, I tell a story, which is a true story, that's why I tell it, I went to sixth form in Cambridge, and I'm not from a very wealthy background. I inherited my accent from the place that I lived. And I would never have gone to university if it wasn't for my law teacher, which sounds really counterintuitive. If it wasn't for my law teacher, I'd have never have gone to university, which sounds a bit silly, but genuinely, I come from like really quite a poor background, and it was on the last day that you could apply to go to university. My law teacher took me, and you know, UCAS, you have to pay to apply to go to university via UCAS. What is that about? Like, it's £27,000 a year not enough for you people? But yeah, in all seriousness, I hadn't applied and I didn't have any money in my bank account. And my law teacher took me to one side and said, James, where are you going to university? I said, I'm not, I haven't applied. She sat me down, she gave me her credit card and paid for me to apply to go to university. And that changed the whole trajectory of my life. So when we looked at tech educators, like, we have this problem with tech, but also supporting people that didn't go to university, didn't have that opportunity, decided that maybe it wasn't for them. And it's like, actually, you can do it too. And I think that's something really close to my heart and why we started that. One of the things that comes through thematically, and I hope it comes through thematically through, because if it doesn't, I failed at this presentation, is for me, it's all about Norwich. Like, all about Norfolk, all about Norwich. This is the place I want to be. This is the place I want to have impact. This is where I want to have change. And so hopefully that will come through. That's a great picture, by the way. Whoever took that, has done the job. Really no water? It's like exercise for you, I don't know. So what goes on with Boulder? What's Boulder? Boulder is, for all intents and purposes, it's pretty uninspiring. It's a city in the middle of Denver, Colorado. I don't even know where it is. It's an old mining town. It has one university. There's no real reason that anyone should care about Boulder apart from the fact that it's got great hiking. But for some reason, Boulder has more unicorns than unicorns per capita than any other city in the US. It's a mining town in the middle of America. Why? What's that all about? And it got really famous for that. And someone turned around and said, well, there's a reason for that, and that someone was Brad Feld, who wrote a book about it, which I'm going to steal and tell you all about. So isn't that great? You don't have to buy a house in. I would, but it's probably better than what I'm going to tell you. But anyway, they wrote the recipe. It's like, actually, there is a process you can take to achieve these outcomes. And that's what that book was all about. So really, there's sort of three major points to the Boulder Thesis that I'm going to dive into today. One, entrepreneurs must lead and be at the centre of the startup community. We have to be entrepreneurial centric. And Boulder are fantastic at doing that, and I'll talk about why. Leaders, and I want to refactor a little bit the way that Brad Feld talks about leaders and feeders, because I think feeder sounds almost derogatory, and I don't think it's intended to, so I'm going to refactor that when we talk about leaders and feeders in a minute. But what he says is leaders have to have a long-term commitment to place. And I think that's really important when we think about the Boulder Thesis, because everyone has a place in the ecosystem. It's just understanding and defining where your place in this ecosystem is. And if you truly want to lead the startup ecosystem and be a central pillar, you have to have at your core a long-term commitment to place. And inclusivity must be at the core. And this is why I don't like this leader-feeder thing. It's just kind of like, it doesn't sound very inclusive, like, I'm a feeder. Oh, why should I care if I'm a feeder? No, I'll refactor that in a minute. Let's move on then. So what actually is a startup ecosystem? Jess, you're absolute legend. Anyone want to watch that word? Well, we said at the beginning, it's like we need to put founders at the centre of this ecosystem, right? Founders are kind of centric to this whole point. And it kind of got me thinking as well, which is where the Boulder Thesis doesn't really expand on that. It's kind of like founders is a big bucket of things. Well, they're not, they're people. People. But what does that really mean? So I wanted to refactor that a little bit. Founders can be anywhere in an entrepreneurial stack. This is what I call the entrepreneurial stack. And again, I've refactored it like a stack sounds top to bottom, like if you're at the top, you're better than people. No, it's left to right, I think, in my opinion. And that includes people thinking about starting a business. Anyone in here right now could be a founder one day. You've all got, like, it sounds really hard, it's not. I'm not saying you're going to be a successful founder, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but just thinking about being a founder makes sure you have the potential to be a founder in the future, and we should put those people at the centre of the ecosystem. There are people who are starting a business. Probably the hardest part is actually taking that leap and going, no, I'm going to give it a go. It might fail, it might be the worst thing I've ever done, it could be the best thing I've ever done. You're in the entrepreneurial stack at that point. There's going to be some attrition rate, but as you go through into a scaling organisation, again, that's part of the entrepreneurial stack. It's probably the hardest part, people tell me. But the scaling part of the entrepreneurial stack, And the bit that everyone gets sort of excited about, that says exited, but also excited, maybe, is the bit where it's like you sell your company. They say like the 2 best days of buying a boat is the day that you buy it, the day you sell it. Maybe with a business, it's the day you start it, the day you sell it. I don't know. I'm the only person in my team that hasn't sold a business, so I'll let you know. Or not. Who knows? So I've refactored this a little bit as well when I'm talking about an ecosystem to say these aren't feeders, these are support structures. Entrepreneurs are the absolute centre with support structures around the outside. And I'll sort of talk about what support structures look like in a minute. And then super, super important, capital. If we're going to make a really successful startup ecosystem, yeah, unfortunately, you're going to need capital. And I always think great ideas will get funded. Great ideas will get funded. I'm going to talk a bit more into capital in a minute. But I think we really need to focus on how we increase the amount of capital that is flowing into Norwich. And I think that success breeds success, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And as I said, this is founder-centric interaction. Is that what it says? Yeah, cool. And what I mean here is in Boulder, the founders are everything. Every support structure asks itself, how can I align myself around the founders to have the best possible outcomes? And guess what? Capital surrounds itself with a successful support structure and successful founders. There are a few people, just to sort of like paint the picture now in the Norwich framework. I don't know who the people thinking about being a founder are today, because they're either talking about it, they're not ready to do it, but it could be anyone, and that's great. We've got Simon in the room who's started a company with us in Excella. If anyone's interested in decortication of hemp, the use of renewables in building, you need to speak to this man. I've shared a couple of hours. And this is Henry Hoffman. He's currently scaling Newfangled Games. He's a BAFTA award winner and doing some great stuff here in Norwich. And then we've got my business partner who's not in the room, thank God, because I always feel like he's judging me because I sort of off of him. Tom Wood, who has exited a company. And then look at like some of the great support structures that we've got. And I've included the ones here that generally are more about including the founders at the centricity of what they do. I don't know if that's a word, but if it isn't, can someone trademark that for me? Centricity. So we've got Ashton's, NUA are really good as a university. Final Clark, HR, they're great at putting founders at the centre of what we do. Sync the City, really targeted, I think, people thinking about starting a startup, which is incredible. And Nordic, like, people come up with great ideas. I was having a drink with someone last night, maybe not the best place to start, or maybe the best place to start a business. And it's like, that's a fucking great idea. Why don't you do it? What's stopping you from doing it? They're like, nothing. It's like, yes, this is what we want. Once like those synapses start firing, they keep firing more. I believe that anyway. So the thing about commitment, this comes back to the place piece for me. I think it's really, really easy to tie ourselves up in knots and say, I'm a founder, but once I've sold, I want to move somewhere and go away. It's like, well, you can't be a leader. And you can absolutely be a leader, but you have to understand your place within the ecosystem. About place is about the long-term view. So when we think about exited founders are great because they've got capital. They can reinvest it into the organisation, they can reinvest it into new organisations, and they can reinvest it into the ecosystem. I'm not saying we don't care about great founders that want to leave after they've exited. What I'm saying is the ones that really will lead the ecosystem over a long time, the ones that once they've exited will put money back into the ecosystem. I'm going to be honest, my goal for Tech Ed is I want to scale it, I want to exit it, and I want to put a ton of cash back into Norwich. Like, I make no bones about that. If anyone wants to know my plan, like, that's the plan. It's on video, 5 years' time, James. And I also want to talk about the great thing about inclusivity. So, Giancarlo, how long have you been in Norwich, buddy? Sorry.
Now it is 13 years.
13 years?
Yeah.
So he's new to the area. Really? But Giancarlo's exploded onto, I would say, the startup scene in the last 3-6 months. You've sort of been doing stuff. And the great thing is, like, already got a new meetup group. In everything that's going on, Giancarlo's there, and hopefully you feel that the community is welcomed into this. And it's like, this is great. This is what inclusivity is about. And I think the best thing about yourself and the best thing about this community is, and the really important thing about new people coming into an ecosystem is like, if you want to help out, Everyone should be able to help out in the community. Everyone. But you can't come with an ego. And by the way, you don't have an ego. No one I know does have an ego in this ecosystem. But it's like, if you come into this ecosystem and you've got to put chairs away to be part of like setting up a meetup group, just put the fucking chairs away, but be part of it. It's like, that's fine, that's cool. You're doing your job, you're supporting the ecosystem. And again, with people like Leanne, setting up women in tech and stuff, it's like the vibrancy of Norwich and its inclusivity is incredible, and I think that's one thing we've already got nailed down. How are we doing at the time?
You've got plenty of time.
Plenty of time. Anyone want to go for a cup of tea after? But the Broads isn't Boulder yet. I think we have to be super aware that, like, guess what? We don't have a time. But one day, we might. We just laugh again, we've got loads of time, honestly. So how are we going to do that? I've put together a 5-point plan for how we're going to do that. And we'll talk into that a little bit. But yeah, put entrepreneurs first. Seriously. Seriously, put them first. Ask yourself, can I be part of this community and where am I in this community? And again, it's fine not to be the founder, but if you are a support structure, what can I do to support that? I think we should double down on inclusivity, and I'll talk into that in a little bit. Accepting failure, I think, is super important, and again, I'll talk into that in a second. And I also want to bring up capital. So, cut the shit, right? The one thing that really pisses me off about the Norfolk ecosystem in the startup space is we do not put the founders at the centre. In fact, when other organisations draw their universe of entrepreneurship in the region, they always put themselves at the centre. I run Acceler, right? And I don't put Acceler at the centre of the ecosystem. It's a lightning rod, it's a support structure. Know your place within it. Stop drawing yourself at the centre of the ecosystem if you are not a founder. And I don't know why organisations do this. I think it's because in their world they are the centre of the universe. And maybe that's fine, but that is not how you create a great startup community. You put the founders at the centre and stop expecting everyone else to circulate around you. And I've got a real example of this. I'm not sure if I can tell it, but I'm gonna. We've just raised 150,000 for Tech Ed. Fantastic. Sounds great, doesn't it? 3 weeks ago, we got the final investment offer from New Anglia Capital. 3 weeks ago. Private investors, it took about a week for the money to come in, the contracts to be signed and done. It's taken 3 months. 3 months for the government body to get to that point. That is not entrepreneurial first. Like, entrepreneurs are famous for moving fast and breaking shit, right? Like, that's the thing. It's like, that's what you do. You move fast, you break stuff. You can't wait 3 months. Stop working on your time frames. Work on the time frames of the entrepreneurs first. Understand where you fit. Like, again, it is absolutely fine if you're not at the centre of the universe. Right? It's something you have to live with. It's like put those people first. But understand where you do fit. If I'm a big organisation and I've got space that I can give another company or a meetup group, or I can buy the pizzas because we've thrown off a load of cash because we're a bigger company, or I can give up half an hour of my time to go and support startups with, a talk, or I can give an hour here. Again, the partners that we've got do a fantastic job of that. But if you are in the opportunity to be a supporting structure and you genuinely care about the ecosystem, show it and do it, but just understand where your place in the ecosystem is and then act accordingly to support the founders that are doing that. Double down on inclusivity. I think the fact that we are such a fantastic and inclusive community already. I was speaking to someone earlier and I said, Norwich is really interesting because Norwich is big enough that there's a lot of stuff going on that you don't know about, but it's small enough that when we all get together, those little networks and interactions, everyone can be introduced to everyone else through, what is the Kevin Bacon 7 degrees of separation thing? Norwich is like 2. And that's fine, by the way, like that's okay. But double down on that, like realise we aren't Cambridge. We aren't Cambridge. We don't want to be like Cambridge, right? I mean, some people might say, well, I don't believe you want to be like Cambridge. Let's focus on what Norwich is really great at. And Norwich is really great at the fact that we have that 2 degrees of separation. Everyone knows someone who knows someone that's going to be able to help you. Use that network. And I think it's absolutely incredible. I'm milking it because seriously, this has gone way quicker than I thought. So accept failure. I think this is a very British thing that we don't do. I think when a founder fails in the UK, it's like, ooh, well, that didn't work, did it? It's like almost someone's tainted it. Like, what do you mean? Do you know what they do in Boulder? They celebrate it. They literally celebrate the fact that it hasn't worked because there's some learning in there somewhere. And they also do something that's really interesting as well. If it's like, I've raised 250,000, say, and I've blown 175,000 trying to make it work. And by the way, your investors will say to you, like, I gave you that money to do something with it, so do it. Right? I didn't give you that money to put in the bank and like get a warm fuzzy feeling every time you open your bank account. I gave you that money to accelerate the thing that you are building, so go and build it. If you get halfway through building it and you're like, all of those assumptions that I had aren't true. I thought that I could accelerate our flywheel of growth by pumping more money into marketing and advertising. It turns out our cost per acquisition is 10 times higher than it should have been, and this isn't going to work. Cut the bullshit and say this isn't going to work. But then give the money back. And be like, look, we aren't hitting targets. I don't think product market fit is right. We're not going to get there yet. Don't go on another race. Don't like become that company that's perpetually raising to try and outpace the demise, because that is not cool. Be the company that says, do you know what, we thought it was going to work, it isn't, here's 40p in the pound back, and I'm sorry, but I'll give you a call when I've got the next big thing where I've iterated it. It's like, why can't we just do that? If we did that, capital would be easier to come by for a start, because they've got 40p in their pound back. I was actually speaking to someone earlier and said, well, we do that with SCIS today, right? We do that with SCIS. Yeah, but it's kind of a government thing. Celebrate it, because what generally happens in Boulder with a celebration of failure is you're reabsorbed back into the ecosystem. So it's like, oh, this person like had something that was quite near what I'm doing, they've got a ton of experience, they know what doesn't work. There's a reason that VCs love to reinvest in second-time founders. They're idiots. No, it's because of the fact that they know there's learnings in it. So use those learnings, re-emerge those, absorb those learnings back into the ecosystem. Let's stop making failure be such a dirty word. It should be a great word. I've got like loads of failures. Seriously, you can ask me about it. Deploy faster, deploy faster. I don't think this is an Anglia Capital issue, but like literally, we've got one pony in town, and it's Anglia Capital Group. And they're good, like they're good at what they do, but it's like, it's not fast enough. Deploy capital faster. This is the biggest thing, it's like we've got a lot of great ideas and not a lot of funding. And as long as we keep not having a lot of funding, it's going to perpetuate that myth of like, don't invest in more for companies. 3 months to deploy capital. UEA, for example, they do a £50,000 offer for graduates. It's like you can sign up if you're with the UEA and you're a graduate and you've got an idea and you can pitch for £50,000. That's fucking awesome. £50,000, non-diluted. I think it is diluted at that level actually, but whatever. Like there's a pot of money there for that. That sounds great, right? They meet every 6 months. What? It's like 6 months could kill a business. Like deploy your capital faster. And the reason is that they do not put entrepreneurs at the centre of the universe. If entrepreneurs are at the centre of the universe, they'll be meeting every 3 weeks. Or every time that someone had an idea. Imagine that. Basically, I've got an idea. Are we going to meet now? Because we'd love to talk about your idea. We'd love to help you. Okay. So I've finished in record time.